play. The music's going to play. That'll be the intro.
Well, I learned from a friend that showed me why. Instead of asking why, start asking why not. Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're lying in the sun. Bit by bit, the older that we get, the faster it tick, 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 ticks. Time flies. Whoa, whoa, time flies.
Piano.
Oh, does it?
Okay, we're on. Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Marshfield Old School Times. We're just a couple minutes late today, but it'll be worth the wait. We've got two guys here with us today that spent a lot of time in this old building back in the 60s, graduated in 1969. We were going to have a third person, but he is in St. Louis watching some grandkids play ball, and that's where he needs to be. So, but we've got with us Gary Price. Now there's more than one Gary Price. This is Beach Gary Price, right, Gary?
Right, Beach, Elkland.
Beach and Elkland. Welcome, Gary. And we got Ben Fraker, my cousin, and Ben. There's only one Ben Fraker though. So, well, no, there wasn't. There actually was a Ben Fraker years ago, wasn't there?
Buffalo.
Yeah, Buffalo. So they're both here, and they were classmates going through school, graduating in 1969. We were going to have Jack Hartman with us today, but as I said, Jack's not here. But we're going to have him back sometime because he'll have a lot of fun stories growing up in around Marshfield and Elkland and Timber Ridge area as well. Logan's with us today behind the camera. Logan, thank you. And of course, we always want to thank Dennis Beck for our intro music. Just great storyteller from Marshfield. Talks a lot about growing up in Marshfield in his songs. Be sure and check him out on YouTube. Well, guys, we're going to get started. Gary, I'm going to start with you. Appreciate you coming in today. This is a real casual deal. Just talk a little bit about. Start out with your childhood, your folks, your family. You had a bunch of brothers, I know, and just tell us a little bit about growing up out in the beach area.
Well, I discovered America in 1951, and Beach was when they took it off the map in '62, it was population was 11, and lots of good memories at the old Beach store. Lee and Mildred Price were my father and mother, and four older brothers, Rex, J. Max, and Perry and Jerry. And of course, Jerry and Perry's still going. Rex passed away in 2000, and Max passed away in 2017. But
Well, if the population was 11, well, there's 5 of you boys and your mom and dad. That was 7 of the 11 right there, right?
well, no,
Wade Young.
we wasn't in the city limits.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, shoot.
Yes, and so we're.
You about double the population if you added you
I,
guys.
I think the Youngs and the Wheelers pretty well encompass the
Uh-huh.
11.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And the beach store was owned by one of the Youngs, right?
Ellis Young and a man by the name of Jim Miller bought that, according to Edna Mae Young Greer. They bought that in the from a man named Mr. Rader, and she couldn't remember his first name, but David Young, that our former collector, he gave me a picture here a while back of the beach store. 1898 to 1962 is the official, and Glenn, one of Ellis's boys, eventually ended up with a store. Of course, Carl, I think, went to Prospect originally, and then he, of course, he built Young's Shopping Center. That was
Carl and Glenn would have been brothers.
Carl and Glenn were brothers, and Wade
Mm-hmm.
and Warner, and they had 3 sisters: Verdi Huffman, Georgie Wheeler, and Mary Ellen Greer. And Glenn was the old house is still there, and people live in it. he would bring out when TV first got started, I was 5 or 6 years old. He'd bring a TV out and had it plugged in an extension cord, and there'd be a bunch of us kids, his and several of the younger kids, sit there and watch the Lone Ranger and things like that. And that was quite an entertainment, you know. Yeah. Johnny, Glenn had Ansley, who recently passed away, and then Ellis, the namesake for his granddad.
We all know Ellis.
And he married Judy Alexander. Yeah. And let's see, Edna Mae married Don Greer, and David, he married a lady by the name of Debbie, and then Johnny.
He was our county collector, David, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I'll mention that. He was county collector and well known, and then Johnny, the youngest one, married Jean Lyndall, and she passed, and I think he remarried a nice lady called, first name's Mary. But had a lot of good memories there. Beach was quite a town at the turn of the 1900th century. It had a barber shop. It had a post office. It had, of course, a feed store, a general store. Let's see, there were several. Frank King cut hair there in the barber shop, and but this Mr. Miller, Jim Miller was his name. Him and Ellis Young was partners in it for quite some time, and so Jim sold out to Ellis, so he was a sole owner then. And he wanted to get in the oil business, so he bought in with Wade Young, which was another one of Ellis's boys. Young's Conoco here locally in Marshfield. And Lena, Jim's wife, she was a sister to old Ellis, so they was brother-in-laws. And the beach store burned, way before my time, but then they rebuilt it. And Ellis Young said that he lost all his records on people, what they owed him. He said, but he ended up, after everybody paid him back, he said he ended up with more money than what they actually owed him.
Is that right? That's great. And you said he stayed in business till 62 then in the new building?
Well, of course, Ellis passed, I'm not sure what year, but Glenn took it over and run it until 62.
Okay.
And what really kind of put him out of business, the convenience stores were starting to just really go nuts then, and so he was breaking even, and his kids was about grown, so he just actually he bought a little store up here on 38 Terry's, wasn't it?
I kind of think I remember Young's Grocery.
He run that right. for a while.
It's where Casey's is now.
Yeah, where Casey's is. Yeah.
They called him Pinhead, right?
Huh?
They called him Pinhead.
Glenn? Oh, I don't know.
And then, was it? And then Buck Young was in that building then he had the station side, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that same building.
Then Glenn Replow.
Then Glenn. Yeah, okay. Glenn Replow bought it.
And then there was a Hobson that was in there too.
Okay. Yeah.
With me and Bill Dyke used to come up there and drink soda pop.
Yeah.
Hobson was the owner.
Glenn Hobson, maybe.
He was a Hobson. I don't know.
That had the meat store.
No, later. He lived out there on DD.
Oh, I see.
But no, when I would walk St. Luke Cemetery and the Methodist Church, they're still obviously going good. I went to a one-room schoolhouse at St. Luke for 4 years, and we consolidated then. And but I'd walk across the field, and instead of taking Y Highway, I just cut across and always stop at Beach Store and get me a bottle of pop.
Now that was a pretty good distance from the St. Luke's School to Beach Store, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it was about 2 miles.
for an elementary,
Yeah.
third or fourth grader or second grader or whatever you were, that's a pretty
Yeah.
good walk.
Well, first through fourth, and then, of course, in the wintertime, not always, but sometimes Mom would pick up some of us students when the weather was pretty rough, and
Yeah.
she would haul us down there and then come and get us.
Yeah.
But when the weather was nice, we walked, and of course there was Johnny and some of the King girls, and there was that lived on back west towards
Johnny
the beach
Birchfield.
store. And then,
Oh,
of course, Johnny Birchfield just lived, he didn't have to walk very far.
Yeah.
Uh,
But your folks live pretty much right on the corner there at Beach.
well, actually,
No.
no, actually about a good 1/3 of the mile
Okay.
from
the
Beach
corner.
heading west, and then
Yeah.
and then Wade and Pauline Young for years lived right across the road from Mom and Dad. And Wade or Pauline and Mildred, my mother, there's a hollow there, and they would step out on each other's porches. It was at least 500-600 feet,
Yeah.
and they would ask how everybody's doing that day, and they converse back and forth.
Yeah, that would be a pretty good holler, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but the sound system was pretty good. Mother Nature provided.
Natural acoustics. There you
Yes,
go. That's
uh-huh.
great. Well, let's flip over just for a minute.
Yeah.
So that gets you to about fifth or fourth grade. Ben, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about? I know you grew up in Niangua and then Marshfield, Osage Springs, or Timber Ridge, I mean, and talk a little bit about kind of where you started in
My
life.
first dad had a farm out there. It's the Buckner farm now.
Timber Ridge.
We lived there for several years till I was. My brother went to school there at Sand Springs School. Then we moved to Niangua, and I was 5 years old. And then the next year, I went to Niangua School.
Your folks, tell me names and everything.
My folks is Glenn and Phyllis Fraker,
Yeah.
and I had a brother named Ronnie, and he passed away in '69, and he had a boy before he died. Got to see him at least, Scott.
And just so people kind of know the connection, so Ben's dad, Glenn, was actually my great uncle. He was a brother to my grandpa, Fred, and there was three boys and a girl, four boys, I guess.
One died.
Yeah, Estrel and then my
They
granddad,
called him
Fred,
Jack,
Called him Jack.
and he had a son, and he was the principal here in '69.
Leroy Fraker. And then my grandpa Fred, and he had two sons, my dad Don, and then Eugene, the sheriff.
They were more as a second family than what they were.
Kind of a spread between.
Yeah, I think Fred or Jack was 17, 18 years older. They was already going.
Than your dad.
And Fred and Norma, which is Noel Thomas's mother.
Right. And Melvin June Owen's mother. And he would know.
Right.
Wilbur Melvin June. And then your dad, Glenn.
They were closer to Gene and Don.
Right. And Glenn married Phyllis Marlin.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
she got, of course, raised out in the Faulkner Hill, St. Luke area. And then with all the other Marlins. And then Roy Fraker would have been the youngest in that family, and that's Gary Fraker's dad.
Yeah, they came back. They settled when they came here. It's called Foose over by Buffalo. And then they moved back, and they were good friends with the Beckerdites.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Grandma Fraker and Mrs. Beckerdite were good because they knew each other, and when they lived at
Dallas County.
down by
Paul's
Foose.
mother and dad.
Yes,
Paul Beckerdice's
yeah,
mom and dad.
yeah.
And they had the variety store on the square.
Right, yeah,
And your grandmother, my great grandmother, was an Anderson, Laura Anderson.
yeah.
So all the Andersons are our kinfolk. So you went to Niagara then 1 year, you said?
2 years.
2 years.
Well, I went there 1 year. I was first year I didn't go because I
Okay.
wasn't old enough.
Oh,
But
yeah.
went to the first grade, and we just lived at Niagara 2 years, and then moved to the Osage, which was down there by on the creek, like it's a place of going straight to the Boy Scout camp. You turn left, follow the creek down to our place.
So that's Bill Dyke, his
Bill-
heirs, Alan Roast, and
Yeah,
Ann would own that now.
yeah,
And the
yeah.
house is still there.
Who?
The house is still there, right?
Yeah, it burned here. I don't know, here a while back.
Yeah, I think that was just the upstairs, is what I was
Yeah,
told.
but they said they was going to build,
Mhm.
and some guy wants to buy it, but they won't. Who got it won't sell it.
Yeah.
We sold it to some people from Florida, and Dad had an itch. He wanted to move all the time. You know, actually, he wanted to get back on the prairie,
Yeah.
where his roots were.
Yeah. Tell about that. So he sold the Osage place, and then what'd you buy?
He bought a 180-acre farm out on J and 38, which is DD then. But his brother lived on around the curve, the oldest one, and he wanted to get close to him. And right before we moved out there, he was excited about getting his Social Security. And he died before he turned 62.
Oh, Uncle Jack.
Yeah,
Yeah. Uncle
Leroy's
Russell.
dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, we lived on the creek several years. That's got fond memories of that place, you know. And Dad I started raking hay at 6 years old. Of course, they'd throw you in jail then now, child labor.
Right. But those friendships that you guys developed in Timber Ridge before you went to school.
Yeah, Jack Hartman
many
was one of
those were lifetime
my best
Yeah,
friends out there.
right.
We all went to Bible school
mhm,
together.
Timber Ridge.
Yeah, Timber Ridge. And a lot of Jim Jones went there, and all the Jones boys,
Mhm.
and Leroy Tarr, which passed away
Just
recently.
recently, yeah.
And I know there's some more I can't think of.
So you bought the farm at 38 and J, and that's many remember that the big Fraker dairy farm is. We all grew up in the 60s and 70s, and the house is still there, and I think Tom Hayes, his
Yeah.
wife, own it now, and they take good care of it. So then you guys kind of connected in Marshfield in about the fourth grade.
Fifth.
Fifth. And Jack Hartman was in there with you. And
Yeah, when
many others.
I come back here, we moved to the creek and started school in Marshfield. Well, this would be unheard of now, but they let me go to town and eat
Eat
lunch across the tracks.
this building.
Yes, across the tracks and went up to the pastry shop,
What grade would that have been?
second grade.
Second grade.
And then the third grade, I'd go to, but McCaskill's had built over there where Dorn Pump is, they had one of these mobile hamburger.
That's called a food truck, right?
All right, well, it is now. It was a trailer then. But Mrs. McCaskill ran it, and then they had a deal for picnic tables. It's called the Blue Jays Roost. So I'd be by myself out there eating. Be a day like today, and I'd be out there by myself eating a hamburger, you know. But and then the fourth grade, they moved us to the new school.
Yeah. Humble building.
Yeah, so I didn't. I was kind of put
You were
out about
out, yeah.
that.
And that was 1960 or 61 when they
Yeah.
built that. Gary, what do you remember about coming to Marshfield? That's kind of a big step to go from St. Luke one room to Marshfield in the fifth grade, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was about 12. It varied. There was 11 or 12 kids through grades 1 through 8, and of course got to Marshfield. It was a good experience for me. Some of our teachers we had there I was a little behind, but with my fifth grade teacher, Joyce Greer, she took a lot of extra time with me and got me caught up and where I could read and cursive writing and things like that instead of print. And and then Then junior high, that was the next big step, and of course that was over here at this building where we're doing this at that time. So
Both junior high and high school were both together here.
yeah, they was combined, and and we had the cafeteria here, but you could eat, you could walk uptown here and eat, and I don't know, it was a good option, good food at the cafeteria, and but it was
But if you was like Benny and you wanted a hamburger every day, you pretty much had to go to town and get a hamburger every day.
well, if you wanted one every day, right,
And I would eat one of that every day.
yeah.
So this would have been about you know, the early '60s, and you guys, you know, developed good friendships. And I've been told you might have done a few things in this old building that probably we can't talk about. But maybe there's something or a thing or two you could talk about. Maybe you could talk about something Jack did since he's not here, or Johnny Brooks, or somebody in your class. You had a pretty good group of guys that, I know, Ben, you had a pretty good football team. You guys played football.
Yeah, we were 1-9.
Well, but you were still developing. I mean,
Yeah.
Marshfield's football was still developing.
We had a new coach that year, and I think the next year they got rid of him. But I liked him. He's a good Andy Mason.
Yeah, yeah. We've got your yearbook here, 1969 yearbook, and it's pretty interesting. I saw one picture in here I was going to ask you guys about, because I really never thought about this for Marshfield, and you may or may not remember this, but it's in one of the clubs, the activities section, and if you look at this picture, it was, let's see, sorry. It's in the Future Teachers of America group section, and on the back, on the blackboard, it says justice, and it's got the peace symbol. And on the front of the desk here, it says PIG, right? The word pig. Well, that was something that was starting to kind of get, you know, kids were starting to say stuff about the police and stuff like that. Kind of surprised me when I saw that in that picture. I'd never noticed it. I know it. But even then, kids were, you know, being kids, and somebody did that probably out of meanness or whatever. But,
Well, we had I think it was our junior year in high school. The Vietnam War was going pretty good, and we had a very peaceful walkout.
okay, I've heard about that.
To protest that, and of course, Ben and I, we wasn't protesting the Vietnam so much. If a chance to get out of class, so we joined on that reason. I think I can speak for him, but we got out here in front on the north side of the school. I mean, the whole school did pretty much, and so
Well, John Cooper called the radio or a TV station.
did he?
Remember that? Oh yeah.
I can't remember all the details. The teachers, well, the principal, I guess it would have been Mr. Hughes, maybe. I believe it was Mr. Hughes.
No, that was
Well, Leroy was the principal your
senior.
year.
Yeah,
He's in
and
the book here.
One year.
and George Ballard was him before him.
Yeah, so I mean, it may have been George Ballard, but I don't think we were seniors that year, but we might have been. But anyway,
Yeah.
They said, Mr. Ballard and some of the teachers said, all right,
Mr. Barr
pardon?
and Mr. Barr.
And Mr. Barr, they said, you guys have made your statement. Now, let's and you've been very respectful. Let's go back in and get to learning, and everybody did.
Everybody did.
Yeah.
Except me and two others. So I wanted to continue it, you know.
You just wanted to be out of class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it was, I'm sure it was tough times with the war, and boys were getting their draft notices and all that. It had to be really, really kind of tough, I would think. The fear of the unknown, maybe.
Well, and then here in Marshfield, Missouri, the marijuana scene, we didn't know,
Non-existent.
Right.
non-existent. Yeah, we didn't know pot was something we thought you went to the bathroom in or something, or cooked something in or
Plant a
something.
flower in.
Yeah, plant a flower in. That's right.
But you know, and that was '69. But you know, wasn't too many years after that, 2 or 3. Then it started coming in. I know, and
Right, and got to be quite a problem.
yeah. By the time I graduated in '77, which would have been 8 years later, it was very prevalent, obviously.
Right.
Well, you remember this or not, but we got introduced one night. Someone moved in here, and we was riding around. If you remember, and we smelled this awful smell in the back
Smell like a
seat.
skunk.
Now, what in the world? And he said, "You want a hit, man?" I said, "No, I don't think so." And that was our first introduction.
right.
It was mine to
Right.
marijuana,
And that was, yeah. Late
and I
60s.
never did partake.
Right. Yeah.
I never. That's one thing I can honestly say. I don't. I got enough trouble on alcohol, and that was legal. You know.
Not at 14 though.
Well, you got to bend the rules a little bit.
Well, again, times were tough, and it wasn't very many years, and then the whole world started changing. And, you know, if you look at this yearbook, you know, the girls are all in their dresses, and their hair, boys' hair, the hair's starting to get, well, it's still pretty short.
Yeah, Leroy wouldn't allow long hair.
Yeah. But then you get about 3 years later, you get to about 72 or 3,
Started to
4,
change.
it's changing big time. So, and of course they were forced to deal with the dress codes and stuff like that. Just had to be kind of tough times, I would imagine. What else, boys, did you guys enjoy in school? And after that, we'll talk a little bit about after school. And Ben, you went in the Marines. Gary, you went to work, and I know you worked several years in the trades and had a good career. But there had to be some more stories from school that you might remember that you can tell.
Well, kind of going back to St. Luke, there some of the older ones. Russell Birchfield was a brother to Jake and Orville and Ernest, and Ernest had the Marshfield Mill, and Russell had a little store down there, and
Now, was Russell Billy Bob and Johnny's
dad,
Yeah.
right? And let's see, there and that Mr. King. Well, Beach had the blacksmith shop. Frank King was the blacksmith for years, and then he retired, and the blacksmith shop was over with, and so him and his wife moved to Marshfield. But his brother Ed King, he cut hair at Beach for a little bit, and then he built a little barber shop at St. Luke, directly across from Birchville store, and the building was probably maybe 14 foot long and 10, 12 foot wide. That had the barber.
Like this building. About like this room.
Oh, this room we're sitting in is bigger
Bigger than that, yeah.
Yeah. And he had a barber shop there for a few years, and it had the blue and white spinning thing. Yeah.
Barber pole.
Yeah, and of course, Johnny and I, we rode our bicycles and stuff like that, and had a pretty good time.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I think the 5th or 6th grades, when Jack and Hartman and Ben and Fred Cole, we all kind of made that's when we got a lifelong friendship. Yeah. And some good memories here.
You betcha.
Yeah.
Uh,
Good teachers. The teachers, looking back, they was good then, but they was excellent teachers.
and a lot of them were obviously still teaching when I was in school. We had,
Yeah.
and there was some that were even teaching when I was in school that my dad had. You know, like Mrs. Case and
Mrs. Robinson,
Mrs.
maybe.
Decker.
A lot of them was brought in from the rural schools to
Yes,
teach.
yes,
Majority of them were.
yes, yes. Mrs. Decker, Rilla Decker,
Yeah, but
and
Olive
Olive
Robertson.
Robertson. Now she had, I think she retired right before I got in high school or about that time. I didn't have her, but yeah, there was Mrs. Compton, and there was a lot of those ladies that were still.
Mrs. Vestal.
John Ivan.
My mother had Mrs. Vestal in school.
Mhm.
Of course, back then they had to have a teaching certificate. They didn't
Yeah.
have to go to college.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Harmon, she was Dad's teacher.
I had her.
I didn't have her.
I
Teresa
did.
Harmon. She was kind of tough.
Yeah.
She-
Good.
Yes. The discipline was not a problem in her
No.
in her classroom.
Yeah.
Fern Thomas, Lee Thomas, of course,
Yeah.
had the buses and the
I
bus
liked
driver.
her.
Yeah,
Fern Thomas was,
8th grade English.
Strict.
yes, she was strict, but man, did she
She
you-
could teach.
That's where
You
your
learned-
grammar,
you
learned
learned,
grammar and your pronunciation. She'd pronounce those words and use her hands, and
Another thing we got to do, Mrs. McDonald's class. That's the year we learn our multiplication
yeah,
tables.
4th grade.
And when we learned them, got so four, she would take us to the sweet shop
Really?
and give us a treat.
Yeah.
So we all got to. Well, I don't know if I remember. Patty Joyner was with, and I don't remember the others, but we all got to go to the sweet shop.
Yeah.
But that was always, you look forward to that.
Yeah. That's cool.
Fern Thomas was on English diagramming sentences and pronouns and nouns, and I can even remember what a dangling participle
There you
is. So she really got that in my head.
I remember her using the word, pronouncing onomatopoeia, and she would say it, with her hands. I can't tell you what it is, but I remember the word.
Yeah.
So in high school, now beyond school, you guys ran around a little at night.
Every
You
night.
wouldn't have ever done any drag race or anything like that, would you, or anything like that,
Every night. Pretty well.
Well, my car, I finally got a car when I got out of school. Had a motorcycle when I was in school, and but my car was a small engine, so I left the drag racing to some of the more mechanically inclined friends of mine, and they took it up. They took up the slack. Believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big deal back then.
Oh yeah. The muscle cars. Yeah. Let's see, the Chargers and the Rams and the
Chevelles.
Chevelles and the Super Sports and the
Camaros.
Camaros, right?
Well, then Ben, you joined the Marines. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I didn't. I was working in Colorado, and I was good friends with a guy that his brother worked out there, Gary Wilson. His name was Dale.
That's not Marshfield, not the Gary Wilson that we know.
No, not Big Gary.
Yeah.
This is, we called him Smokey
Okay.
because he smoked all the time. But he was an athlete.
Yeah.
I mean, built like a. You can tell what he looked like.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was good friends with his brother,
Uh-huh.
and he was in the Marines, and he talked all about it. Kind of got me interested, and so I waited till worked in Colorado that year. Then we went to Arizona and worked out there, and then after that, I joined and went in December of '70.
70.
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam was still going pretty strong then.
It was starting to
Tail down
kinda
just a little bit.
scale down, and they'd taken a lot of troops out. I know when Da Nang, that was where I used to have to go all the time. They was a lot of the troops were already gone.
Yeah.
There was just wasn't many there then.
And you had a pretty good career there. I mean, you had a pretty good deal with the work for the admiral on the ship.
I worked for an admiral. He was commander of Carrier Division 5, which he was in charge of we had escort ships, and he was in charge of all that, and all the sorties and all that. That was his. And can tell it now, but he would go up with the pilot in an F4.
Wasn't really supposed
He
to.
wasn't supposed. Oh no! If he'd have got captured, man, that would have been a plus in there.
Yeah.
But he's a 2-star. Well, he made 3-star.
Right.
But he's a 2-star admiral then. But he went up pretty frequently.
Yeah. So there wasn't too. How many Marines were on a what ship were you on the most?
Well, I was on the Enterprise, Constellation, and Kitty Hawk.
Kitty Hawk,
And they had remember, it's called the Marine Detachment.
Yeah.
And I didn't live with the Marines. I lived with the Admiral's staff.
Pretty good deal.
Oh, yeah, I had it. Yeah, I wouldn't want to live.
Yeah. But so the Marines were sort of brought on to kind of
Well, they guard
the admiral.
No, they guard the brig.
Guard the brig.
They all guard duty. And then, of course, the Kitty Hawk, or the Enterprise was nuclear. So they guarded the nuclear space.
I see.
But that's what they done and of course they was on cruisers too, you know. They had a full detachment of Marines.
And you would be out to sea, and then you'd go into port at different cities.
Yeah, we'd go to I went to Hong Kong, I think 5 different times. And Singapore, we went there a couple times. I didn't care for it. And we were on our way to Australia, Sydney. It's called the Coral Sea Celebration. And we were almost there, and they turned us around. That's when the Indian-Pakistan War broke out. So all day long we went through it's called the Straits of Malacca. That's the only land we could see, you know. And all day long, the helicopters were landing. They were making plans to evacuate all the citizens in India.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but they went out on a commercial airplane, so we didn't have to do any of that.
That's what they were going to do.
But that's what they were going to do: go in and get them, and bring them out to the carrier. But like I said, the Jolly Green Giants,
Would it
what
have
they were
been
called.
U.S. citizens that were over there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Huh. Then Gary, about that time you started working?
Yeah, I got out of when I got out of high school, I went to work at Zenith, and Zenith had a very strict policy. If you missed one day on the first 60 days, you basically didn't have a job. You know, there was lots of people wanting jobs, and so I had strep throat, got sick at the plant, and that, of course, a big outfit like Zenith, they had a nurse available, and she said I had about 104, and sent me home and told me to see my family doctor and get some antibiotics, and I did, and had the doctor's excuse and everything. And when I went back, 3 or 4 days later, I got my pink slip or layoff. And so Johnny Birchfield had went to work for my cousin Jim Price in Kansas City at working on Crown Center, and that's when it was just first getting started. And so I went to work up there on that project, and let's see, worked construction for 40 years, and it's like anything else. It's feast or famine. You make either pretty good money or starve out, and so depending on the situation. But no, it was considering some of the being inside an elevator shaft 40 stories up, hanging off there with my tied off. I've had some, but I've got hurt 2 or 3 times and required surgery, but other than that, I was pretty fortunate. Yeah.
You worked out of that Kansas City shop there most
Yeah.
of your career. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you stay up there during the week, come home on the weekends, or how did
Yeah.
you do it generally?
I stayed. Well, I stayed over at Independence for a while, for about 15 years, and then I stayed at Raytown for about 15, and then various other places, and then of course when I wasn't working in Kansas City, I'd work in Springfield. That was a joy there because it was home, and Parsons, Kansas, and then I went out to California for a while. Everybody's got to do that, so I went out there and worked out at San Jose for a while. Same company, and
You and Tweety Bird.
yeah. Yeah. And so anyway,
Probably a private joke there we can't understand yet.
but no, got got married, remarried, second wife. Let's see, in 1983,
83.
and we just celebrated our 40th here. Yeah. But no, construction work, I enjoyed it. Hot in the summer and cold in the winter, but it was
What was the biggest building you ever worked on?
a 42-story in Kansas City, downtown there. And the performing arts in Kansas City, that was quite a, that was one of my, let's see, that was in 08, I believe, when I worked on that. But got to meet a lot of good people and had, and it's dangerous work, but it's we had good safety protocol for the most part. Yeah.
Do you remember, were you around Kansas City when they had that big collapse at the Hyatt or whatever it was, that hotel? I bet that was a
Hyatt
big deal.
Regency. Yeah, the company I worked for actually worked on that building, but we didn't work on
on that part.
on the skywalks is what they called them.
That was a bad deal.
That was, I had several friends. I was home on the weekend. That was on a Friday night and Saturday, but I had several friends that volunteered with in construction that went down there and helped them clean up and get bodies and injured people and of course people that passed away too. Yeah.
Ben, did you ever run into Jack Hartman when you was in the service? Because you and him, he was in the
Yes, I
Navy,
did.
right?
Yeah, I came home on leave one time, and I fixed it to where I would have 2 days in Hawaii, and Jack was stationed there.
Yeah.
So we got visited,
Yeah.
and then it wasn't just a few weeks later, he got TAD'd to temporary duty to the Philippines.
Yeah.
So we were together over there in the Philippines.
He was already married then, right?
Yes.
He was over there with you.
Yeah. I even took them a tour of the ship when they were there.
Yeah.
Wasn't really supposed to, but I did anyway.
Well, didn't Jack do an 8-year hitch in the Navy?
I think it's maybe 6. I don't know.
Well, it was at least 6. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you boys?
One thing I'd like to say,
Yeah.
I don't know, when I came back here, I worked in Texas 8 years, and down there, your license tells on the front that you were a veteran. In Missouri, I had to get licensed here and had a little old bitty place in the back.
Yeah, on the back of the license.
Back of the license.
You got your license on here?
Yes.
We'll show it here so people can see that, because it's kind of neat.
And so John Black and I were talking one day, and I said, that's terrible. He said, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
And he got the law changed.
Yeah. That's how legislation can work. It starts with a idea. Somebody can bring an idea to a legislator, and I remember, Ben, you talking to John about that.
Yeah.
He said that's a great idea, and so
there in the front. You can see it.
This is your real ID thing here. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, the veteran, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If anybody can see that, if you're a veteran, this little ribbon, this little banner ribbon right there, that black and white, that says veteran. And because of Benny's suggestion to John Black, they made that happen.
John got it changed.
Yeah, he did.
Well, I had 4 brothers as all veterans, 2 Army, 2 Marine. My lottery number, they was drafted at that time, was 357. They was only taken down to about 180 something, so I would have never been drafted.
Right.
Then I tried to enlist. Well, they'd take about anybody, but they wouldn't take me. I had a bum shoulder. And they said,
yeah.
we don't want you. So anyway, but my mother said one time, she said, well, 4 of my boys out of 5 served. And she said, that's enough. But I do have a lot of respect for the veterans. They're the ones that,
Yeah.
that's why we sit here and have this conversation.
That's
because of them.
That's
yeah.
right. And you would have, if you'd have been a year or 2 older, you probably would have got drafted. It just happened to be that the war was winding down by then. We had John Black on last week. John's the same way. His number was 200. He was a year behind you guys, and he said they weren't even taking the guys by then that were in the hundreds, below 100. So just the way it worked out. And of course, by the time I graduated in '77, they had done away with the draft. And
What didn't exist?
It didn't exist. Matter of fact, there were 2 years that we didn't even have to register. My class and the class right behind me, there was actually 4 years, but President Reagan got elected and they brought the registration back. Carter done away with the draft and the registration, and then President Reagan, that administration brought the registration back, but they made it 2 years back, not 4 years back. So I missed, me and the class right behind me missed registering. So, or class ahead too. Anyway, but I've always felt the same way, Gary. We owe it to all those that have served, and certainly appreciate that for our freedom. We honored the Vietnam. I don't know if I've talked about this on this show or not much, but it'd be a good time. We've honored the Vietnam veterans that died in the war at a reunion fest. We did that a few years ago, and I think there were 8 of them. 8 of those.
We couldn't remember 2 of them.
And you guys knew most of them because they were in school in the '60s and so forth.
When the war was really
Yeah.
heated up.
Right.
Yeah.
And we certainly, appreciate their service and their sacrifice and the ultimate sacrifice. Matter of fact, I'll get that list of those guys, and we'll honor them on the show next time. So,
I just can't think of the other 2 that we couldn't think of.
those are 8 names we probably should always remember. We've got just a few minutes left, about, I don't know, 8 or 9 minutes according to my clock. I really appreciate you guys coming in, and again, there's lots of stories out there that probably you don't want to embarrass someone else, and that's okay. We don't want you to embarrass anyone else.
Or ourselves.
Or yourselves. But certainly fond memories of Marshfield and going to school here and Elkland and all of that, and it makes us appreciate where we're from. We've been really fortunate to have some good guests on that have been able to share many of those stories as well.
And also, too, our class was the first year that they had the building trades.
Oh, yeah.
69.
Yeah.
So.
Did they build the first house over there in the Fraker?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember they bought a couple lots over there.
Harv Alexander was our teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Good
can show
man.
you those houses.
Yeah.
Our ball field, we had a little ball field over there. Dad had saved 2 lots, and it was right over there by that ball field. The boys would be out there playing or working, and we'd see them and so forth. Yeah.
I don't know how much work we done. We had a good time.
Then Billy Joe Gower took that over
Yes.
years later, and
Yeah.
he had it a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And then Taylor had it too, I think, didn't
Kevin Taylor,
Yeah.
later on,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. he? But Harv Alexander was the first one. He was retired carpenter, and he knew more than we could, you know.
I was thinking about your football team and how young football was in Marshfield in those days. I know it started Mr. Gentry, I was talking to him one day, John Gentry, about when they started football, and I think he was instrumental as maybe not the first coach, but maybe was the first coach.
Well, George Ballard was the first coach,
George was involved,
I think.
yeah.
And then when George Ballard played football at SMS, a lot of
Okay.
people didn't know that.
Uh-huh.
And I think Mr. Barr did too.
He
Someone
did.
told
He
me
did.
that.
I've seen that picture on
Yeah,
Facebook.
yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. But that, of course, the football field, the school built the football field for football.
Yeah.
I guess that first year, but they only had just a small set of bleachers
Yeah,
on that
yeah,
west side, nothing on the east side. And those bleachers, then later on, when they built the bigger bleachers, which they've now replaced them too, that little set of bleachers went over to the baseball field. But I can remember, Ben, your mom and dad and the Hartmans and a lot of those parents sitting on those little bleachers. And,
There was a
know.
picture in here of
I guess,
Laverne Hartman, Edgel Pruitt,
Mhm.
and my dad standing up. It was raining, I believe.
because there wasn't very many seats there. A
No,
lot of people
no.
would have had to stood. Of course, they didn't have the crowds they have today.
No.
It wasn't as big of a community event, but
Well, that one year though, must have been 70 or 71. We had a super football team. C.E. Wales,
Yeah.
that was the sure.
yeah,
We went undefeated that year.
Okay. yeah.
Well, Brent
In a
Thomas
regular
played
schedule.
on a
70
team.
That was 78. I think it was in 78 they had it, and that was an undefeated season. The Thomas boys and Charlie Davis played on that team, and there were several Hundergaard that went on, and he's in service, a career in military, and Ron Replogle, Ronnie, the
Yeah,
colonel,
yeah.
was on that team. Quite a few guys, but now the year or two ahead of you guys, Jim Hartman, and that bunch, weren't they
Bob
pretty
Madison, Joe
good? 'Cause I know,
Young.
I know Jim was a great halfback.
Absolutely.
His nickname, Crazy Legs.
Crazy legs.
Yeah.
Because he could run.
Well, that's something, you guys had a nickname for everybody.
Well,
You
yeah.
can't tell most of them, but I know you
Oh,
did.
actually, they wasn't that bad. No,
What was Jack's?
Slick.
Slick. Yeah. Yeah. It was it's a different time, that's for sure.
Well, I don't see that picture.
Now was the big wig and the Dairy Princess both
Oh, yes.
going pretty
Yeah,
strong
yeah,
by then?
yeah. Yeah.
That was the place to
Yeah.
hang out.
Big Wig and Dairy Princess.
Mm-hmm.
There's one story you've got to tell, Ben, and you'll deny it, I think, but didn't something happen in study hall or something one day, and
There's lots of things happening. Study hall.
something about somebody had an epileptic seizure or something like that? Does that ring a bell?
Could have been. I mean, there was so much going on back then.
So that's not something you think you can tell?
Probably not.
Okay. Well, anyway, they had a lot of fun.
I majored in study hall. Yeah. No, seriously, I had enough credits in my junior year. I fixed it around where I had 4 study halls.
Well,
I had 3 classes where I actually
yeah.
done some work,
Yeah.
or, school work.
You met your requirements.
I had football And then, well, I had building trades. That counted as 4 credits, I guess. And then I had shop, study hall, and then football 7th hour.
Yeah.
Well, Leroy, my cousin,
And the principal.
yeah, and the principal, he wouldn't let me do that. He said, you need, so he put me in psychology and sociology,
Oh,
which
you
what new
used.
thing?
Stanley Beamish was the teacher.
Stanley Beamish.
Yeah, well, that's what he called.
I've never
we
heard
called
of
him.
him.
That was the nickname.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It's a cartoon character
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
But I wouldn't
Actually-
recommend this. But I dislocated my shoulder in football, and I told him I was left-handed, so I couldn't write. So for 6 months, I didn't do nothing. And finally, they decided, well, you're not suited for this class. So he went ahead and put me in the metal class.
And you were using your right hand.
Oh yeah,
Class.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I played the next weekend on Friday night. So, but I told him that I couldn't write.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Ben, if you hadn't had sociology and psychology, well, you'd never made it.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
I
right.
guess that's
Because
really.
you applied that every day.
I guess that's why I was such a
Yeah.
big success in life.
Oh, goodness. Well, Logan's back and it's 2:00. So, guys, anything else you want to add before we just depart here?
No, thank you for putting up with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming in. We'll do it again. We'll get Jack in here with you and make sure that he can contribute to the conversation. And have a feeling he'll bring up a few things that maybe
Interesting.
will make you want to talk a little
Interesting things, perhaps. Yeah.
But like I say, a lot of things we can't talk about.
more. Yeah, well, we understand. We've all had things in the past that we probably shouldn't talk about, so that's okay. But as long as you've got those memories and the friendship, that's the main thing that you all have.
Yeah,
Weathered all.
we've never had a cross word.
Yeah,
We've been friends since
Forever.
dirt.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's what it's all about.
Yep.
We'll come back next week. We'll have another good guest, and we've lined up some pretty good folks to come on. Can't tell you yet who it'll be, but we'll have another one next week or two. And appreciate the support. We passed the 100 subscribers last week, Logan, you told me. So people are watching and listening and enjoying what we're trying to do to document some history. And, you know, it's all about connections and connecting families, connecting folks. We really appreciate people watching and helping us. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, just let me know. Don't speak too loudly, or we'll want to have you on our show. Share your story as well. So with that, guys, thanks again. We'll leave it with you and see y'all next week. Stay warm.